Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today, it's the full review of the Beta 85 Pro 2. This is going to be pretty fun, so let's get into it. Featuring 1103 11,000 kV motors, 2-inch 4-bladed Emax Avant props, the Beta FPV F4 flight controller, which also has a 5-amp ESC, Beta FPV's A01 camera, the A01 VTX, which has power switchable between 25 milliwatts and 200 milliwatts, boot and bind buttons right down there, comes with a Beta FPV battery strap. I added this little bit of UMA grip, XT30 for your battery connection, comes with an extra set of props, and an extra camera mount that's 25 degrees. It also comes with one 2S 300 milliamp battery. Inside, I also flew it on these batteries. It weighs just over 41 grams. With the included battery, it weighs just under 59 grams. Outside, I would recommend these batteries. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting about 88 millimeters. So the main flight that I already showed you outside was on the recommended size of battery, but not the recommended battery. And I'll refer you to that because I really didn't do more full flight testing outside. I did some testing for specific issues like Yaw Washout, which we'll get to here after we watch the indoor flight. But when it comes to whoops, the main purpose I see them for is flying inside, whether it's inside your home, someone else's home, an office, a warehouse, a gymnasium, some industrial structure that allows for flying in it. You know, this is what these quads are for. And keep in mind as you're watching this, especially if you're relatively new to the hobby, I've been flying inside my house on 2S since 2016. Now, some people recommend, starting with a throttle cut. When the Mobile came out, that was a big deal. People were starting with the throttle cuts, anywhere from 60 to 80% throttle cuts. That would be the maximum value. You'd get 60 to 80% of the throttle. And if that helps you fly, do whatever you like. But that's not how I do it. I just go ahead and I adjust to whatever the machine is. And I quite felt that this was really easy to fly inside the house. Matter of fact, I didn't crash nearly as much as I thought I would, and I started flying faster and faster until I started crashing a little bit more often, because I do want to crash these things. Not intentionally, but that's real life flying. We crash these things, and so I kept pushing myself until I got to those crash points, because I want to know what's going to fail. I want to know if the motors get hit too many times, because these props are pretty rigid and stiff. Do we have any problems with the motor stems or the bells or anything else going on structurally? There's a frame break. The one thing I can tell you is if you buy one of these, get extra canopies or plan to print a canopy or get a different canopy altogether. They've been using these canopies on their Whoop products, especially the indoor Whoop products, for quite a while, and they just break. You could probably put packing tape on them to hold them together a little bit better, or coat them in welder, or use E6000 and coat them before they ever crack or break, and that might help to keep them together. But eventually, with enough flying and enough fun, the canopies are going to snap. You can pick them up from Amazon if you're an Amazon shopper, and there's actually some pretty cool ones out there, really. Again, that's extra money out of your pocket, so keep that in mind. The price point, as it's seen on Beta FPV's website, is $99. So in my opinion, that's pretty competitive. And in this indoor flight that we've been watching here, I am flying on the recommended size of battery. I can't tell you which battery it is. I am pretty certain it's not the Beta FPV battery, because the one thing I can tell you about the Beta FPV battery is it sits a lot flatter than all my other batteries. It is a very square battery. So when you have that battery strap around it, it does sit quite square, and we didn't start off that way, nor do we end that way. So, it wasn't the Beta FPV battery, so it was one of the others. And you can see there our recovery on our voltage at 3.69, almost 3.7 volts per cell. So I could have flown even longer than I did. So while we're talking about this, I'm going to play some flight footage over here in the top left-hand corner. That shows the Yaw Washout. The Yaw Washout, when you're doing like a building dive scenario, can be pretty dramatic. So if you're looking to take this outside and do building dives specifically, I would say you need to pass. You probably just need to pass on this format altogether. There are very few whoops that I've found in this format, regardless of size, that can do dives and not suffer from that Yaw Washout. We had the iFlight 111R on, and that wasn't really a whoop. That was more a traditional quad or micro that had prop guards on it, that could do things just fine. But these smaller ones, it's rare that you find them that they don't. So I don't really consider that a dig on the product, but I do think it's something that you need to be aware of. As I said, I broke the canopy. I think it was on my third or sixth to last flight, and here it is. This was the stock canopy. I have got a host of these canopies. Let me get those out and show those to you. I pulled out a good assortment so you can see what I was talking about. Like, these designs are kind of cool, and you can find them on Amazon. You can probably find them off of vendors that sell Beta FPV products, as well as Beta FPV's own website. You've got clear, which can be kind of cool to see the inner workings. This one I just beveled out for some reason. I don't even recall. And of course, I've got a stack of blue ones. I do approve of the color, of course, because I am partial to that. At one point in time, I don't have any printed with me, but Robert Thompson designed a mount that would make the camera adjustable that would fit inside one of these canopies. So that's something you can consider if you want to have quick adjustment on your canopies. And I'll link that from the Thingiverse design page down below. Thump 2010 is the designer name, if I forget to do that. Also, you could do something like the Newbie drone canopy. It doesn't necessarily fit the color motif, but I do think the camera would fit in there, but you're going to have to glue it in probably. I don't think it's going to fit perfectly with the little tabs inside this in order to be able to use that natively. But these are good, strong mounts. I wouldn't be too concerned about breaking those if you do mount them up. I've been flying them on the Splinter, the Mode 2 Splinter, and I've had a good number of crashes. Actually, just today, they live up just fine. Of course, you can 3D print something like this. This won't fit at all, but I have used it before. You're going to have to glue your camera inside of this. Of course, there are thousands of print files available for you. Canopies out there as well. Just cruise through, search for Tiny Whoop, and you'll find all sorts of prints available for you to print if you have a printer. If you don't have a printer, maybe a buddy does, or a local library, or even a school or a university might have a printer that they give the public access to. I should also note that when you're changing anything on these micros and you're adding weight, it is going to change how it flies. So it could either do something like throw the tune off, the flight time could come down, certain maneuvers, it just might not operate the same way as the short version. And you know, this coming in at just over 40 grams, you add 1 gram and it's going to be fairly substantial. Now, if you're just starting out on your FPV journey, you might not notice it too much. But, you know, the more accomplished you become as a pilot, or the closer your feel to the quad you get, that if you add weight, it's going to change things. So be cautious when it comes to adding weight. I know why they continue to use this is because it's very, very light, and that helps to keep the overall weight down. And so it helps people like myself be able to fly like I did in the video that I showed you. Hopefully you've seen enough footage over here to the left to where you've kind of gotten a feel for how it flies outside. If you haven't, I will refer you to my original video, which was a kind of a first pack, first look. And I think I am going to do more of that. I think that's pretty interesting for the channel. So look forward to first pack, first looks, or some, I don't know, I'll figure out some title. But I enjoyed my first flight, and I enjoyed all the flights I spent flying this inside. I think it's probably one of my favorite whoops, but one of the things it doesn't do well because of the physical size is go through those really small spaces. And let's look over here again, and here is some slower flight footage so that anyone who hasn't come to the channel before and seen me fly inside, you don't have to go blasting through the air. This camera angle that I flew it on, you don't have to use that. You can use the other one, but I used the 35-degree camera angle the entire time. But even with that, because of the wide field of view, you can slow down just by easing back on the stick. Now, naturally, as you use more camera angle, you will kind of want to go faster, so that's something you're going to need to be aware of. More camera angle generally increases your speed just organically. So I was speaking to the size, and one of the things that it doesn't do well is go through small nooks and crannies. So I should rearrange these so you get a better idea. So if you like to go through tight spots, like, you know, this can go through underneath chairs very, very easily. Like going through smaller spaces through chairs gets to be more challenging, or whatever small hole that you've got is you're going through is going to be easier with something smaller because you've got more margin for error. And as you climb from a 65 millimeter to a 75 millimeter to an 85 millimeter, doing that sort of flight is going to increase your challenge because of the decrease in the margin for error. And so I found it pretty challenging to fly this one through chairs and some of the smaller holes. I could still do it. I just wasn't nearly as good at it as, say, I might be with the 65 millimeter. So if you like smaller space flying and you like to go maybe a little bit more gradual or slower, and you like to go through those small gaps and holes, the 85 millimeter version might not be what you're looking for. You might be looking for something smaller. And I thought laying it out this way gives you a good idea of the visual representation, because the number or numerical representation doesn't necessarily tell you the difference in physical size. So something to keep in mind, although I enjoyed this immensely, especially flying it inside. And outside was fun too, but for outside, I would probably fly something that we might call a toothpick or twig, just because that's what I like to do. But these can all be very, very fun. Of course, the 65mm over here is 1S. BETAFPV does offer a 65mm 2S version. This, of course, is just a trash can. I brought those out just as a representation. This is kind of a custom trash can with two 1102 motors on it, but I wanted you to get a visual representation of the difference in size. Some people also won't like the camera view. These little CMOS cameras that have been around for a while, and they have gotten slightly better since, say, when I first started some 4 years ago. And I think this one's pretty good, but I have a strong affinity for a super wide field of view. So that's one of my primary things I'm looking for. Maybe it is because I fly inside so much, or I do so much proximity flying, that I like to have that idea of what I'm going through, kind of that pod racing sort of feel of stuff whizzing by. But some people won't like that. And of course, if you don't like that and that is your #1 priority, then you're probably looking at a different product. You're probably looking at a product that's more geared towards outdoor. Because if you just add the small nano-sized cameras that we have now, you're probably going to be adding about 2 grams. So that's going to change things, in my opinion, somewhat substantially. So that's something you have to decide. The props took a beating. As you can see, I actually flattened these tips. I flattened those out a little bit. But if you look around, you'll see grass stains. You'll see where those little fins or tips on the end of those props have all been turned up pretty well. But the frame is in good structural integrity, no problem. Oh, I did add the UMA grip because I did find that with the battery strap and crashes, because, you know, we crash and whoops quite a bit, it was shifting forward. So I added just this little sliver of UMA grip right there, and it kept my batteries nice and tight in place. You could use something else. I happen to have the UMA grip, and so I just added one little slice. I didn't even actually put it on the front. I just put that little bit on the back. Of course, the motors, there's only 2 screws in each motor. Again, that's a technique to help keep weight down. You could even go deeper with your keeping your weight down by removing this battery strap and going with those cheapo depot ones, if that's your thing. I'm not. I prefer a buckle, so I would leave this in place. But you might be able to drop 3/4 gram, maybe a gram, if you went to one of those cheap straps that you cut it to length, and it's got that fat end. You're supposed to thread it through, but I can't stand that stuff. Sometimes on these frames, we'll see LED lights wedged here in the back. This one does not keep that in mind, and I have never, ever figured out why we've got these little 2 nubbins up here at the front. At one point in one video, I joked that it was for towing purposes, but we don't tow drones. That was, of course, just a joke. So I have no idea why we have those here. This did come with Betaflight 4, so you'll find it pre-tuned. I did not change any of the tunes. I only put the OSD elements in the locations that I like to see them in. I bound it up in D8 mode. Of course, you could hear it in the flight video where the telemetry, when I went downstairs, it was calling out. I also tried it in D16 mode, and I found in D16 mode I would get slight lockouts. Every once in a while, you know, it's just that moment where it just wouldn't respond, and it would be like a half second, maybe a full second. I think it was probably a half second, and that's why I switched to D8 mode. D8 mode was nice and smooth in the house. Oddly enough, outside, D8 and D16 was just fine. So there might be something about the house that's a little bit more difficult in RF, even though I have been flying in the house with the same Wi-Fi equipment for 4 years or 3 years now. One last tip. If you wanted to go from a traditional 1S into a 2S like this, you can get or make a wiring harness like this. I found this on Banggood. I've pulled it out of another quads, but this allows you to take 2 1S batteries and plugging it into something like the Beta 85 Pro 2. Fortunately, I'm finding it sold out. So I need to crowdsource. Where can we find those for people who don't want to build one? Of course, you could take a couple of ends like this and you can put it to a traditional XT30 connection, which this is the wrong end, but you get what I'm saying, and we can build one. But I think a lot of people who might be switching from 1S to 2S could use something like this. This came in the URUAV 85 HD, and it is listed on Banggood's website, but I don't know where you can buy it because it's showing sold out, and it's not talking about it coming soon. So at $99.99, are you going to hit the winter laps with something like this? Or are you going to go with something else altogether? I'm very curious to know what you racers out there are going to be doing this winter. Me, I'll be just flying inside the house annoying the heck out of my kids. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.